Welcome to the Christian Success Show, the show that helps you achieve more success in every area of your life. I'm your host, Wes Young. Thank you for joining me today. The Christian Success Show is brought to you by Christian-Success.com. Visit Christian-Success.com to join the community and check out the special $7 deals designed to help you achieve big success in specific areas of your life. If you want personal help achieving more success, you can find out how to work with the top Christian life, success, and business coach and consultant at Christian-Success.com/coach. Now, let's get started with today's show. Today's show is how to start a podcast. I talk a lot about starting a side business to add a little bit of extra income, and a podcast is an easy way to start a fairly simple side business. And I want to talk about how to start one, equipment that you might need, what the show's going to be about, the format, whether you need a website, and things like that. So basically what we're talking about is starting a podcast just like the one you're listening to now. And it can be about anything that interests you, because there are other people that have some of the same interests that you do. It doesn't have to be a huge market. It doesn't have to be about the most popular subjects. Maybe you love corgi dogs, or a particular breed of cat, or rose gardening. It doesn't have to be business related or success related. It can be about anything that interests you, because there are some people out there that are interested in the same things and might be interested in listening to what you have to say. So if you're going to start a podcast, we need to talk about some of the equipment that you need to develop and produce a podcast. I use a laptop computer, so the easiest way is to use a computer. However, if you don't have a computer or you don't want to use a computer, you can even record a podcast on most smartphones. So basically, you need some type of electronic equipment, either a computer or a phone or something like that, to record your podcast. The next thing you need is some kind of audio software. And it's easy to start looking around and look at audio software, and you find some that cost hundreds of dollars. And the fact is, you don't need the top-end audio software in order to do a podcast. What I use is Audacity, Audacity, Audacity. It's a free audio software that you can use. It's fairly simple once you learn how to use it the first time, but any audio software you get is going to have a small learning curve. If you have trouble figuring out how to use audio software, I've found that if you could find a teenager that knows quite a bit about electronics and computers, often they can figure stuff out very quickly. So if I get stuck, I go talk to one of my daughters, and usually they can explain it to me fairly quickly. So either a computer or a phone, some sort of audio editing software. If you use a computer, you can use the microphone built into your computer. I use a higher end microphone. What I use is an MXL 990. But once again, you don't have to buy a high-end microphone. I've had this mic for several years because I've done some TV stuff using it and other radio stuff using it. So it's something I invested in years ago. I don't remember exactly how much it cost. I think it was somewhere around $100. But what I'm saying is, you don't have to use or buy a high-end microphone to get started. You can just use the built-in microphone on your laptop or buy a low-end microphone to get started. The next thing is something that you don't 100% have to have, but most podcasts have a little bit of intro music at the beginning of the podcast. And it just seems like if you want a professional podcast, you should probably have a small amount of intro music. Now, what you want to look for is royalty-free music. And basically, you can't just use any music because music is protected and you can't use it without permission. So you need to find some royalty-free music, and you can find some free royalty-free music, but sometimes you have to pay a small fee. But basically, you want to make sure you have a license to use the music. And then once you have all of these things, what you do is you record your podcast, however long it's going to be, and then you record it in your audio software, and then you use your audio editing software to put your royalty-free music at the beginning, and then you save your file all as one, and then that's your podcast. So that covers all the equipment that you need to get started. Once again, don't feel like you have to go invest a lot of money to get started. Get started with what you have and then move on from there. Later, you can upgrade your equipment if you feel you need to, but there's no need to invest a lot of money up front. So the next question is, what's the show about? Pick a subject for your show and move forward with it. Start listing some topics that you're going to want to cover with your show, and then just get started. You don't have to do a podcast on a regular schedule, even though it's a good idea. I suggest starting with just one podcast a week so that it's not too much. And then if you have a lot of subject material, you can move to 2 or 3 times a week or even to a daily format. But I don't recommend starting with scheduling too many podcasts until you learn the ropes and see how much you like doing it and see how much it takes you to do, how long it takes you to do each podcast. So decide what your podcast is about, and don't worry about what other people think it should be about. Make a podcast about what you're interested in. The next thing is the format. Are you going to do a solo podcast or an interview format? This podcast you're listening to is a solo podcast. I research each show, and then I just basically talk through the entire show. That's a solo. There's many podcasts that are set up with an interview. Basically, you find other people interested in whatever your podcast is about, and you interview them on the podcast. Either method can work well, and it's completely up to you. Do you need a website when you have a podcast? The fact is, you don't have to have a website, and it's something that you can add later. I recommend having a website for your podcast, and to have a website, you're going to need a domain. You're going to need hosting for your website, and I use WordPress, which is a free system that helps you manage your website. It makes it as easy as possible to post new pages and edit the pages that you have. You also are going to need a host for your podcast. There are many good podcast hosting companies. The one I use is called Podbean, but there's plenty of other good ones out there. So you're welcome to take a look at Podbean. I think I'm paying around $10 a month for my podcast hosting. You don't need to spend a lot of money on podcast hosting. There are some free podcast hosting platforms, but I don't recommend going with free. I recommend going with an inexpensive one, because when you go with free ones, there's usually quite a bit of limits placed on it. So now you've got all the equipment you need. You know what your show's about. You know the show format. And you know you have to get podcast hosting. The next thing is also important. Once you have your podcast live on your podcast hosting, you want to get listed in podcast directories. And there are probably hundreds of podcast directories, but there's only about 5 that you need to make sure that you're in to start with. So you start with these 5, and then you can go to get listed in more podcast directories. And a podcast directory is basically a place people go to find podcasts. The most popular one is iTunes, which is what Apple owns. The iTunes podcast directory is the biggest and most important one to get into. Another one is you want to be listed in Google Play, and then you want to be listed in Spotify, and you want to be listed in Stitcher. Those are the 4 big ones that you want to make sure that you apply to once you get your podcast live. That's iTunes, Google, Spotify, and Stitcher. Now, all that's left is for you to get started and to take action. If you want to start a podcast, it's really simple. Put together the equipment you need. Remember, you don't have to spend a lot of money. You can probably get started with what you already have. You can use a free audio editing software. You can use the mic built into your laptop or your phone. You can find some royalty-free music. Decide what your show is going to be about, whether it's going to be solo or interview format. Decide whether you want to start with a website or if you want to put that off for a while. Set up podcast hosting, get listed in podcast directories. That's all there is to starting a podcast as a side business. All that's left is to take action. Get started with your podcast today. I want to sincerely thank you for joining me today. I know that you have plenty of options on how you spend your time, and it's an honor you're letting me help you achieve more success in your life. God bless you. Don't forget to check out the special $7 deals designed to help you achieve more success in specific areas of your life at Christian-success.com. If you want personal help achieving more success, you can find out how to work with the top Christian life, success, and business coach and consultant at Christian-success.com/coach. Have a blessed day.